Today we're covering the 10 most common push-up mistakes. Our goal is to learn what not to do so we can correct our technique, get stronger, and prevent any unnecessary injuries. By the end of this video, you won't be making any silly form mistakes that the average person generally makes when they're doing push-ups. Let's start off by talking about range of motion. So in this example, the top half is perfect. We're seeing a full range of motion with the elbows extended straight. But if you look closely, you'll notice that my chest is not touching the ground. I know it looks really subtle and you might be thinking, oh, it's only a small range of motion loss, but you need to think over the course of a few reps, over the course of a set, this really adds up. I tend to notice that those that don't use an absolutely full range of motion with every single rep tend to have a hard time when it comes to full range of motion in general pushing exercises. Next up is a much more obvious reduced range. As you can see, it's a really clear difference here when missing that full range of motion and we're only doing a partial range. We're working that mid range of motion, avoiding a lockout and just focusing on the bottom. Especially when it comes to bodyweight exercises, using a reduced range of motion isn't great as we won't be getting stronger through the entire joint range of motion. This is because when it comes to doing more advanced bodyweight exercises, straight arm strength is very important. We want to avoid building bad habits with a missed lockout. Next up, we have the old elbow flare. When it comes to elbows being flared during an exercise, this is a big no-no for most people. The average person has limited internal shoulder range of motion, and this flared technique causes discomfort in most people. We really don't want to aggravate our shoulders for no reason, and when it comes to elbows being flared, this tends to irritate the rotator cuff tendons. Remember, you've only got one body, you've only got one set of rotator cuff tendons. You need to make them last for life, so use correct technique and don't flare your elbows. A simple way to correct this is just to tuck your elbows, find a position of elbow orientation that suits your shoulder anatomy, and go with that. Always go with comfort when it comes to exercise. This first mistake is when the lower back is held passively into extension. Uncontrolled, forced extension under fatigue is a scenario which can produce back pain in some people. See how the hips are sagged and my groin and chest make contact at the same time? This is the telltale sign that you're not stabilizing your midsection at all. Another less obvious error is when the form is fine on the way down with the abs engaged and the body in a plank-like posture. However, on the way up, notice the disconnected technique? I'm slacking off from the waist down and doing a strange hinge action with the upper body. If your form looks anything like this with two motions happening, your ab engagement is obviously lacking. Lastly, when it comes to lower back technique, we often see people pushing their hips up and back when they're doing their push-ups. It's a small technicality, but we want to keep consistent form standards rep to rep and set to set. With push-ups, people generally don't consider what's happening at the upper back. Hunching the upper back will result in push-ups which feel more difficult and also result in lower rep sets. Our shoulder blades can't function properly with a hunch. Shoulder blade position and movement is key for getting the most out of your training, so I really want you to avoid hunching and use a proud extended thoracic. Alright, moving on to number 5. The old forward neck, aka goose neck, aka I want to make my push-ups easier neck. With a forward neck, the range of motion will be stopped when the head reaches the ground. This makes the exercise much easier as you don't need to go as deep with this technique. This is a really subtle way your body's going to cheat you from getting the full benefits that the push-up has to offer. On the other hand, cranking the neck and looking forward and up is the second neck fault people tend to do. Your nervous system output is controlled at the level of the spinal cord and the brain. If you excessively extend the neck, you'll experience some degree of power reduction as a result. Straining with a max set of push-ups while cranking the neck backwards isn't a great idea, and your chance of injury, discomfort and pain is increased a fair bit. Some people might disagree with me here on this point, but with this video, I'm primarily aiming at those who don't have much push-up experience. I find when you're trying to do the push-ups fast during a set, people tend to break down their form. What I mean by this is that range of motion will be inconsistent. Some reps are going to be full lockout, some won't. Some will be using a full range of motion chest to the ground, some won't be. You'll also find that the technique from rep to rep will be different. There'll be some arching of the back, there might be the hips rising up, there also might be some neck fault with the neck looking forward or up. All these compensations tend to happen more when the exercise is done quickly. I find that when people simply slow down and focus on what their body's doing, they have a greater connection with awareness of their range of motion, awareness of what their shoulders are doing, and their form and the sensation of the exercise is increased when doing the exercise slower and with better control. I'm just going to come straight out and say it. I think doing kneeling push-ups is the wrong exercise if your goal is full range of motion push-ups. This is for those that are new to push-ups who may not be strong enough to do a full rep and they approach their training in an inefficient and ineffective way. Kneeling push-ups are a poor exercise choice because it's almost impossible to have a good lower back and hip alignment. Notice that my hips are sky high. This looks nothing like a normal push-up. Also, if you try a set of kneeling push-ups, you'll notice that your scapula gets jammed into this really uncomfortable position and it can't move organically like it normally does in a normal push-up. A better alternative is to use eccentrics. This is a fancy way of saying simply lower yourself down into the position of the exercise that you're trying to do. Absolute beginners can do incline eccentrics to make the exercise easier. Simply set up in a push-up position, lower yourself down with control, and then rinse and repeat for several reps. Once this exercise gets too easy for you, I want you to make it harder by taking the same principle and applying it to the floor. Floor eccentrics are a great option because now you're in the specific position you're trying to do. You get a chance to work on what's happening at your lower back, what your shoulder blades are doing. You can use a full range of motion and apply the body tension that you need to do in a push-up. Once the floor eccentrics are getting manageable and you can do multiple reps with really good control, I want you to work on the full range of motion push-up using an incline. Your starting point will really depend on your level of strength, but as your hands get closer towards the ground, the exercise gets more challenging. By applying these techniques for the push-up, you'll progress faster, ingrain good habits, and you'll be doing your first rep on the ground in no time. This next section is one of the most important parts of today's video. Whether you've been doing push-ups for years or you've just started your journey, I really want you to pay attention right now. First up is shrugged shoulders during the push-up. If your form looks even remotely like this, you definitely need to work on proper scapular positioning. The shrugged shoulders technique unnecessarily strengthens the scap elevators, which includes your upper traps and your levator scap. These can contribute to poor shoulder function, and they tend to be strong in people already. There's this really big misconception in the fitness world that the scapula needs to be glued into retraction during push-ups. This is definitely false. The scapula needs to move freely from retraction to protraction, so being drawn back to being pushed away from you. Correct form in the push-up involves retracting or squeezing your shoulder blades together as you lower down, and then protracting or pushing away as you rise. Number 9 is training with pain. So wrist pain during push-ups is something that can happen to everyone. Now, instead of pushing through pain like an absolute hero, grab a pair of parallettes or even dumbbells and do your push-ups with a neutral grip. This is because when we use handles, we're in a more neutral wrist position with less wrist extension. This is compared to a floor push-up where we're in a fair bit more wrist extension, which can cause pain if you've got wrist pain already. I really wish I could get this message out to more people who have the goal of getting bigger and stronger. Simply adding reps, doing the normal push-up for more and more reps is only a good idea if your goal is endurance. Now, I know the majority of the people training would rather get stronger and build muscle instead. Guys, using a harder bodyweight exercise is the key. The archer push-up here is a great example of working towards the one-arm push-up. With bodyweight training, you've got a huge amount of exercise to choose from to keep you challenged and progressing over time. It's so important that you train in accordance with your goals and remember to aim for progress which matches those goals. Guys, if you enjoy my free content here on YouTube, I invite you to check out the Bodyweight Academy. This is the #1 resource for all things bodyweight and calisthenics. Go to FitnessFAQs.tv and learn how to master your body.